It's the Blood Red Podcast, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along. Darwin does his thing as Liverpool's forward evolution begins to take shape. Yes, we'll react to the Reds' 5-0 thrashing of RB Leipzig as Jurgen Klopp prepares to crack the whip out in Austria. To get into it all, we have our Liverpool correspondent, Paul Gorst, the chief, Ian Doyle, and returning to the pod, a warm welcome back to our new old social whiz, Marcus Banks. Chaps, I trust you're all well. And, well, Gorsty, I'll throw over to you. And you may well be whispering during today's pod because, as the saying goes, let sleeping dogs lie. Your dog laying behind you on the sofa. But in terms of yesterday's preseason run out, certainly after maybe a few, I don't know, people getting a bit nervy over some of the performances in preseason for certain players, Darwin Nunez just completely blowing them out of the water yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you only have to look at the team sheets from the three games to realise that this was going to be a significant step up in performance from Liverpool. Jurgen Klopp played 6 teams, didn't he, across the 2 games in Thailand and Singapore? You know, three teams getting half an hour each, and we've seen players who a lot of Liverpool fans would never have seen before, I'd imagine, depending on how closely you follow the academy ranks. But yesterday's team was probably as close to the one that we're going to see against Fulham as you're likely to see in pre-season. Obviously, we're going to have Alisson Becker back in for Adrian, and there's a debate over whether we're going to go with Darwin Nunez or Roberto Firmino. But generally, the only other real bone of contention was whether you consider Naby Keita or Jordan Henderson to be your starting midfield. Everything else was pretty much as it was. Same back four, the start of the Champions League final. Diaz and Salah involved, and so it showed in the performance. I thought Salah was excellent for the hour that he played. And obviously it was Darwin Nunez's night, wasn't it? Coming off the bench and getting 4. A mate of mine texted me at half time saying Nunez hat-trick incoming. And he was kind of like, he was feeding into the nonsense a little bit, to be honest, earlier this week when all the trolls were about on Twitter because he missed one chance against United and didn't do much else in the other 2 games. And then he messaged me saying hat-trick incoming, and then within 25 minutes, he'd already got that, and then he got a 4th. So, I mean, pre-season results don't really matter, do they? But you'd rather be winning them than losing them. And Nunez looked sharp. He looked like a all-action target man, didn't he? He had a header that was saved. He took a second one in particular really well, and the other 2 were really kind of poachers, finishers, and of course, the penalty. I was saying last night on the debrief that it wasn't really a token gesture with him getting the penalty because he did take them for Benfica, and if you watch, some of his goals he scored last season, a few of them were penalties, and he slotted them all away very coolly. So he seems to be very good from 12 yards. I'm not sure Salah will give him the duties full time when the season begins, but it's always good to have someone who can stick the ball away, on pens, because we saw last season Liverpool involved in 2 shootouts that won them the cup. So all in all, it was a perfect night for him and a perfect night for Klopp.
Yeah, definitely. As soon as the penalty was given, he was loitering there, waiting maybe for the opportunity, and he was given it. Doyley, welcome back. You've been out watching the Reds on their Far East tour. How did you get on out
there? It was all right. Bit moist for me. So you didn't think I was going to say that, but I have said it now.
Yeah.
I'll explain. My hotel room in Singapore, the air conditioning didn't work properly, and this hotel, by the way, had no windows in the room. So it was a little bit strange. It had about 7 mirrors and 5 vents. So, So whenever I went back to the room during the day or later on in the evening, everywhere was just like damp. So that's my main take from the tour is moist dampness, basically.
And you came back to a heat wave?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought I'd get home and be like, oh, excellent. It's going to be nice and cool. Oh, dear. No. So, got there eventually. In terms of the football, I mean, I'm sure you've covered it already in the podcasts when I've been away. I mean, the United game was just funny in a way. I thought, everyone getting carried away with Manchester United winning a game of football when they were like a week ahead in their preparations. And then, as Gorsty just pointed towards the whole hoo-ha over Nunez, which I think, weirdly, I think some Liverpool fans, kind of, played into that little trap by going on about it for far too long. It's like, well, if you actually write it down, I actually wrote it down last night, that being my job. He played, when he actually came on and scored, he played 63 minutes of football. So in the end, he's ended up playing quick maths, 115, I think it is. 105 minutes of football for Liverpool. He scored 4 goals. So you'd say, well, that's actually quite good going, to be fair. But admittedly, the keeper should have saved at least 2 of them. But they've all got to go in. And I think just going back to the touring, as Ghosty said, in the Far East, there were 1 or 2 youngsters who came through who people were looking at and thinking, well, where have they come from? Mcbay and Bajcetic, which I'm sure you've already spoken about, as me and Ghosty have been down the academy quite a lot last season, the season before. So we've known about these lads. I mean, Bajcetic, he suffered an injury, I think it was around about February, March time, which ended his season, which is probably why he kind of fell out of view to a lot of people. But he'd already made the switch from centre back to defensive midfield, so he's somebody who's probably going to do quite a lot for the under 21s, isn't it, this season? Not the under 23s anymore. So yeah, looking at the game last night, Ghosty said Salah thought it was very good. It all goes well. He's signed his contract. He's put that behind him. Nunez looked reasonably sharp, while also looking as though he's only at like 60 or 70% with his new teammates. For the rest of them, Carvalho, I'm sure we'll get onto all these because I know, Guy, you don't like it when I just do these long answers and answer everything in the podcast.
No, it's just like a little preview to everyone, isn't it? We are going to talk about Bajcetic.
I won't mention any more players other than to say, yes, Nunez did quite well.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Bajcetic. We're going to talk about Salah. We are beginning talking about Darwin Nunez. Marcus, how exciting is it to see Liverpool with an out-and-out number 9 there leading the line, really being the man at the top end of the pitch? Because during Jurgen Klopp's tenure, near on 7 years now, it's not really been something that Liverpool have done. Yes, Sadio Mane and Diogo Jota through last season started to play that kind of role, but a real specialist up there. It's something to get really excited about, as proven with Nunez's performance against Leipzig.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people have made that point that it's something we've not had. And a lot of people have also made the point that given the system that Klopp uses with the emphasis on the fullbacks and the crossing ability of both Trent and Andy Robertson, it's something that should have been considered maybe before. Having someone with his aerial prowess, power, loves to play in the last line of the defender. I think that's something that they're going to thrive upon even more so. When you consider the goals that have been scored by forwards who aren't really in that build. And I think there was glimpses of it last night. There was a few times where he ran off the back of the defender and like Doyle said, he's only about 60-70% understanding with his teammates, and that's only going to improve and it's going to be a real problem for the Premier League. But I think one thing that's worth mentioning, Firmino looked really sharp as well last night, and back to the performances that we know he can interchange with the forwards and that. I think it was Luis Diaz who actually looked a bit off the pace instead of it being the other way around last season. But I think Firmino's performance will definitely give Klopp some food for thought over who he does start. But that's ultimately going to be a net positive for Liverpool if Firmino's back to his best. And if we do sort of transition to a 4-2-3-1 this season, there's no reason why Firmino and Nunez can't be playing in the same team.
Yeah, really good point and interesting. And on that, Gorst, I suppose in many ways, Roberto Firmino was kind of the forgotten man of the forward line last season. And a large part of that due to the injuries he kind of had early stages of the season. And by the time he got back to full fitness, Luis Diaz had arrived and everything sort of seemed set in place. But with Nunez as well and the goal threat he carries, whilst Luis Diaz looks very good on the eye and certainly creates an awful lot, maybe, and I wouldn't say a big question mark, but is he quite going to get the goals that Sadio Mane got? He, of course, is still adapting to A, how Liverpool play and B, the Premier League. But with Nunez in there, it kind of feels as though the goal-scoring burden can be shared around a bit more and maybe even a bit taken off of Mohamed Salah.
Yeah, well, it's going to have to be, isn't it? Because Mane averaged 20 goals a season across the 6 seasons at Liverpool, so that's going to have to be made up somewhere. I'm not sure Diaz is going to be hitting those types of numbers straight away. I noticed Klopp said something last season along the lines of his shooting. Once he gets his shooting, fully attuned, then we will start to see him score a few more goals. But at the moment, it doesn't strike me as someone who's going to go and score 15 to 20 goals. He's an electric player, and he's going to be an absolute nightmare for opposition defences, and he's going to be a great outlet for Liverpool on the left. But I don't think he's going to be replacing those goals that Mane has scored. Firmino, you mentioned about him being a forgotten player. I thought he was to an extent. I just think just because you know what you're getting with him. He's been there the longest. And everyone else sort of had a little kind of storyline, if you like. Diaz came in January. Mane was talking over his future for a long time. Salah, will he, won't he, with the contract. Jota was hitting form, and then there was talk of him becoming the new kind of number 9. And Firmino was just there, just doing the same things he always has, just knitting the play together as that kind of false 9 that Klopp loves. But yeah, there's no question that Mane's goals are going to have to be shared collectively from a little bit more from Firmino, a bit more from Diaz, and we'll see what Nunez is able to do leading the line. Because it was exactly 20 a season that Mane averaged. He got 120 goals in 6 seasons. And he was undoubtedly a world-class player. So, yeah, Liverpool, particularly Diaz, Liverpool's forwards are going to have to step up. Hopefully Jota can do something similar to what he did last season. Big ask for them now. We got over 20 goals, which is the most he'd ever scored in a season. But generally, I think Liverpool are looking in good nick. They've got 5 going into 3. And then the likes of Carvalho, Elliott, who can play in the wide areas if needed. So, yeah, I think Liverpool are heading into the new season with pretty much, with the exception of Jota, everyone's getting a full pre-season, aren't they? So that all bodes well.
Yeah, it does certainly bode well. And Doyle, it looks as though it's going to bode well in particular for Mohamed Salah. He got the scoring started against Leipzig, and it was a nice, tidy finish. It was almost like play had kind of stopped, and he just rolled it into the back of the net. But how big do you think this full pre-season is going to be for him? And I suppose having seen him up sort of close and personal whilst out in Thailand and Singapore, he looks to be in incredible shape and really hungry for this new season off the back of signing that new deal.
Well, he is Liverpool's best player, so that does help. I mean, that's the entirely reason why he did sign the deal. He probably thinks he can get the best of his game playing at Liverpool. Before we go any further, the big question about Marcus is: was the gaming scene gone? Was it all gone? Anybody who's been here, a long-time podcast watcher will know Marcus used to have a very nice setup in his room, and now he seems to be stood sat in front of a green wall. What's going on?
It's still. I just swap it out, didn't I? The cat called it to death, so I had to get a new chair. The setup's still here, though.
Fair enough. Yeah, go back to the goals question, by the way, Guy. What Gorsty? There was a good point there, actually, because Jota's obviously injured. He's probably not going to be fit for the start of the season. Mane's gone. Minamino's gone. And Origi's gone. And I think that's something like nearly 60 goals from last season. And I think Liverpool ended up, 147, was it? And so that's nearly half of their goals will not be available for the start of the season. I know a lot's going to rest on Nunez, which is probably why him actually getting off the mark against Leipzig is that important, because he kind of now, he's got that off his back, hasn't he? He's not going to be worrying about it. So I wouldn't be surprised against Fulham if Nunez doesn't start, because as Marcus said, Firmino's been excellent all the way through. All the way through. Only played 3 games, but you can tell from his level of performance, his hunger, and it's the kind of little things that he does. He did a little nutmeg, didn't he, against Leipzig, which nearly set up a chance for Diaz, and the fact that he was pressing as well. They're all the things that, as the lads have said, because he's been there for 7 years, people got used to it. And it's not new, but it was interesting. We spoke with Jordan Henderson after a training session in Bangkok last week, and he was asked about, the new signings and we're going to miss Mane, this, that, and the other. And he made a point without even being asked about him. He said, "Look, Bobby's back fit, and we really missed him last season because he was injured all the time." And he didn't say, "Oh, he's like a new signing," but the reality is, he probably is going to be, and that is something that it's kind of like the open secret. Everyone knows about him, and the opposition know about him. But how many times have we seen Firmino play? And certainly when he comes up against, remember, I think it was Shrewsbury or someone like that, where they said, we never ever play against players like this at our level. We're just not used to it. We don't know what to do. Do we mark and do we follow him into midfield or whatever have you? And while I agree that Luis Diaz, he's probably not going to get the goals that Mane got, I don't think he probably will have to. As long as he just keeps on setting up chances for Firmino, for Salah, for Nunez, for Jota when he's back, I think he's going to end up being very, very important for Liverpool this season. And of course, you got to bear in mind, he may well be playing for a new contract.
And it's really interesting, isn't it, in terms of Roberto Firmino and what he brings there, as Doyle said, Marcus, the fact that he's been at Liverpool 7 years, 6 years, kind of in this false 9 role that Jurgen Klopp wants from him, and yet still nobody quite gets to grips with it. A lot made about how Liverpool and City have both gone and bought out and out number 9s this summer, and maybe that's going to be a change in approach. But Roberto Firmino is still kind of the puzzle opposition defences are yet to solve. Do you see it as a straight shootout between Nunez and Firmino then for that starting berth on the opening day at Fulham?
just given the Jota injury situation, yeah, I'd say definitely. But I think something moving forward, wouldn't be surprised to see Nunez perhaps move over to the left too. I know he sort of operates in that role sometimes with Benfica coming in off the left, and if Firmino is going to keep up that form, then it's something that I think we could see as well. Nunez coming off the left and Firmino linking the play from the middle. But I think just based on pre-season form, I think Firmino is probably going to take that spot. But it's going to be interesting moving forward, given that Jota, Firmino, and probably Nunez are all going to be vying for that starting spot. And I think Jota sort of might be keeping into that forgotten man sort of spot too, given that he didn't really do anything wrong. It was sort of similar to Joe Gomez. He did nothing really wrong. Just found himself out of the team after Diaz came in. And like I think people forget sort of how many goals he did actually score for Liverpool last season, and now obviously Nunez is the new signing. But Jota, I think he is primarily a central player. I don't think he plays as well wide, even though he has played on the left and the right. So Jota's going to be in that conversation as well. The goals he scored last season were really number 9 poachers' goals. So it's good to have options, though. I think that's what Liverpool benefited really from in the running last season, having all those forward options to keep that the push for 4 trophies alive, really.
I think one thing we have to bear in mind is something that we'll get on to probably with Elliott and Carvalho, is that 5 subs in the Premier League is going to be a massive bonus for all these forwards. I think you're a lot less likely. You're not going to change your keeper during a game, and you're a lot less likely to change your centre backs. You might change your full-backs possibly towards the end of a game. And with midfielders, they kind of do tend to come in and out. But you look at Klopp and the players that he likes to change during games, it's 3 forwards. So, I do think they're all going to get opportunities, certainly, and in attacking midfield as well. So Liverpool are going to need them. So say Jota, when he's fit, isn't in the team, there's every chance he could be coming on after 30, 35 minutes in most games, and then they can mix and match. So once they got the first couple of weeks of the season out the way, I'm pretty right in saying it's the game every 3 or 4 days, all the way through up until the World Cup, with the exception of one international break. I mean, they play, is it 5 league games in August? I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the season starts a week earlier, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty unprecedented. I can't remember it being that many, and I'm about 50,000 years old. So
did you just say as well there Jota can be coming on after 35 minutes? Or do you mean
sorry, I meant for the last 35 minutes. I mean,
I was going to say
35 minutes if he wants. Yeah, I tell you that. If that starts happening, then you'll know something a bit weird's going on here.
No, I am interested to see how many managers. I mean, we didn't really see it all through pandemic ball, but I'm interested with 5 subs how many do actually start going. After half an hour, it's not working. I've got the subs. I might as well start changing things up. It will be.
They probably got those that a lot of subs are done with freshness in mind. It's very rare that players get subbed because they're playing absolutely awful.
Or a manager admits they got the game plan wrong.
Well, Maria used to do it all the time, didn't he? I say all the time. I can remember him doing it twice.
I was going to say it's twice in every goes.
All the time.
Yeah, no, definitely. In terms of kind of how the squad's coming together, Gorst, the one position and player not really spoke about during pre-season, Ibu Konate, it looks as though maybe that is going to be the partnership. It was obviously for the Champions League final. He's had a full season under his belt. There was a slight error at the end of that first half that allowed a chance from Nkunku, well saved by Adrian. But do you think we're set for a big breakthrough season for him of really trying to nail down being Van Dijk's partner, or do you think it will be a bit of a carousel of options alongside the big man?
Yeah, well, I was quite surprised that he started the Champions League final, to be honest. Everyone was fit, weren't they? And I thought Matip might just have been slightly ahead of Konate in the pecking order, but it's the old question, isn't it? If Liverpool have got a Champions League final tomorrow, who'd you start? And Klopp went with Konate over Matip. Personally, I still think Matip and Van Dijk are Liverpool's best centre-back partnership, but there's not enough in it to make me concerned if you see Konate starting ahead of Matip if Matip is fit. Liverpool have got a great selection of centre-backs. I'd probably argue the best 4 as a collection in European football, because we know how good Joe Gomez is, even if others have forgot. When he's fit and firing and he's got momentum and rhythm that Jurgen Klopp talks quite a lot about, he's superb, isn't he? He was the centre-back that was Van Dijk's partner when Liverpool won the Premier League title. So I think for him, if he just carries on as he is, I still think he's 4th in that list, but I think if he gets a few more games under his belt in the position he likes to play, I think we will start to see him close that gap and be more of a realistic option for Premier League games. But it does appear at the moment as though Konate is slightly ahead of Matip, and Gomez is a little bit further back in that. But whoever plays as a partnership, you've got no concerns at the moment, have you? And then Nat Phillips, if he doesn't go, then he's a really good fifth option to have, isn't he? So Liverpool really strong at centre back, and it wasn't too long ago that we definitely couldn't say that.
No, definitely the case. So let's talk a bit about the youngsters then, Doyle. You obviously down at the academy often watching and seeing how a number of the players get on. But to me, it feels this season, and we were just speaking there before about kind of having 5 substitutes available this season, that the younger members of the squad are going to play a real key part. And we've already seen that in pre-season with both Harvey Elliott and Fabio Carvalho, and even Curtis Jones too, really showing what they can offer to this team. And really, I suppose, will have that thirst themselves for taking on more responsibility in game time this season.
Yeah, the interesting thing is which ones do they keep and which ones do they let go out on loan? Because obviously it looks like Tyler Morton's going to go to Blackburn for the season, which Blackburn are a good example, actually. Harvey Elliott went there 2 years ago and was excellent. Glenn Clarkson went there last year and it didn't go quite to plan. So that's an example of a club that quite clearly likes taking on loan players, is used to it, it's used to helping develop them, and has a relationship with Liverpool. But sometimes what happens is sometimes it doesn't. Now, Liverpool have to make a decision on quite a few of them. Is it time for them to go out on loan and get experience elsewhere? But then the player themselves might think, well, hang on, if I stay at Liverpool, I've got a chance of actually playing some games here. But it might not happen. So it's kind of like, and Ghosty just mentioned, Nat Phillips, whether he goes or not. Sepp Vandenberg, now, does he stay at Liverpool and become the 5th centre-back? Or would he rather, because he's just had an entire season playing for Preston, which
also played at right back. Yeah, exactly. But he also played right back there.
Yeah, and Liverpool just bought a right back in Calvin Ramsey and sold a right back in Nico Williams. So it's a strange one. And of course, Isaac Mcbay was one of the stars coming through, or the youngsters coming through, I should say. He obviously showed his inexperience with the goal that was conceded against United, but you can see there's a player then. He's only 17. So he's somebody he's too young to go out on loan, I reckon. And he might be in and around training with the first team squad, but playing for the under-21s this season, like Tyler Morton was last year. And looks like, it might be better for Morton to go and play in actual grown-up football, as it were, more regularly. So, yeah, Bajcetic is another one. How old is he, Ghosty? I think he's 17, isn't he? 17, I think.
17, yeah.
Yeah, 17, yeah. So he's got that claim to fame of being the last signing before the Brexit rules came in. I think it's literally like a matter of days before it happened. And he's another one who he might be in and around the first team squad training. Probably might not. He might play in the League Cup, possibly. What's it called? Is it the EFL? What's it called? No, Carabao. It's the Carabao. Is it still the Carabao? Yeah.
Well, the EFL. You go with that.
Gonna say, to be fair, Liverpool don't play in it till about November, did he, or something stupid? Because the early rounds are really early on, and then there's a massive gap, isn't there? So, yeah, there's that. Yeah, but the youngsters, Liverpool do have some decisions to make whether to let them go on loan. But it will be also interesting to see what impact the fact that they've gone back to under-21s. It shouldn't really make that much impact because the reason they've gone back to the under-21 limit rather than under-23 is the fact that most of the under-23 teams had an average age of about 19. We're talking all the way through, not just Liverpool, but most of the teams. And Liverpool, of course, have copied what United did last season with Paul McShane. They brought in Jay Spearing. So, again, that's one to keep an eye on. But, yeah, it's summer tours, these kind of camps are always good experience. Obviously, Liverpool have only taken a few of the youngsters. A lot of them tend to be goalkeepers because obviously there's injury worries over Alisson, who's gone but isn't quite fit yet, and Queven Kelleher, who's out full stop for we don't entirely sure know how long and when he's going to be back. So opportunities for the keepers. But yeah, as I say, we'll go on to some. There are still some young players in the Liverpool first team squad who aren't even 20 yet, who are going to get chances, who I'm sure we're going to mention in a minute.
Yeah, we're going to do exactly that. Marcus, Fabio Carvalho, we spoke about Darwin Nunez. How excited have you been by him? Because to me, from even only glimpses of pre-season, looks as though he could be a player set for a bit of an impact like Harvey Elliott had last season. Saw him in pre-season and thought, it's a strong pre-season for him. He'll be there to be counted upon through the course of the season. And then straight from the off, Jurgen Klopp had his trust in him and really saw what he could do. And Fabio Carvalho seems to kind of be a player who maybe on the quiet might fit into that kind of mold.
Yeah, I think the excitement obviously started in January when the whole the rumour mill started, and then it sort of became a possibility that he was going to come in January for the end of the season. And I think fans were already excited what he could bring then. And then when that move fell through, there was a bit of disappointment. But once it was sort of confirmed he was coming at the end of the season, Liverpool fans have had a long time to watch him now, and obviously seen what he's about with his performances in Fulham, and he was so important to that side of the Marco Silva playing some free flowing attacking football. So he's definitely going to bring something new. I think his versatility too. I think he came on the left last night. He can play on the right. He can play in the 10. I think Klopp's mentioned it a few times too about him being that 8. And we saw Coutinho being used in that role towards the end of his Liverpool career before obviously he moved to Barcelona. And it was devastating for Liverpool. They had that sort of fourth attacker in a deeper lying role, and especially with players like Nunez, who loves running off the shoulders of the last defender. Having a player like him who can unlock a defence, but also beat a man too. I think that's something that Liverpool needed at times last season. Coming up against that low block, you sort of need that midfielder to take a man on and take someone out of that low block to create space for the forwards, and he looks like he can be that man. There was a touch, and I think Leipzig were quite out of position, but there was a deft touch over the head of the defender, which led to Nunez's fourth goal. And it's just moments like that you think, this kid's going to be really exciting. And when you pair someone like Harvey Elliott with that, then you've got two potential, future Liverpool stars in midfield who obviously know each other from the time at Fulham. Then it's exciting. You can see why Klopp's so high on him.
Yeah, definitely. You throw Curtis Jones into the mix there as well, Gorst. It feels as though since Gini Wijnaldum's departure that maybe Liverpool's midfield isn't as functional as it once was, and those kind of two wider midfield players who play in front of Fabinho are at times given more license to go around, get forward and enjoy, sort of get involved in the attack. Even Jordan Henderson yesterday was demonstrating that at times as well. And it's not just kind of minutes for minutes sake for these young players to help their development. Jurgen Klopp really does have a lot of responsibility he puts on them. And we were talking earlier on the pod, maybe there's a goal deficit that Liverpool need to pick up. And I suppose looking at the likes of Elliott and Carvalho, a feeling that actually from midfield they can be players who get goals, which for a long time Liverpool's fans have cried out for a goal-scoring midfielder.
Yeah, I'd be wary of putting too much pressure on them to score goals from midfield. I think Elliott's only scored one, hasn't he, for Liverpool? That was in the game against Cardiff in the FA Cup. Carvalho did get quite a few last season for Fulham, but that was in a Fulham team scored over 100 goals in the Championship, I think. And Mitrovic was, I think, did he break the record last season for most goals in a Championship season?
There's a team scored the most second-tier goals. But on that point, and sorry to jump in, but is it not quite comparable to how Liverpool play a 4-3-3, a left-footed, wide, creative / goal-scoring forward that Fulham had with Harry Wilson down that side, and a focal point in Mitrovic, which who knows Nunez might recreate, and a team who dominate and see a lot of the ball. To me, yes, the quality is going to be a very big step up, but does seem kind of playing style quite comparable.
Yeah, definitely. The interesting one is Carvalho, because we know that Elliott's probably going to start in midfield, isn't he now? Because he started there last season, and had it not been for that ankle injury, who knows how many times you would have played there on the right of that midfield three. But with Carvalho, he's probably best as a number 10, isn't he? And Liverpool don't really play with one of them. So it's a case of, I don't see Klopp tweaking the formation to kind of get a number 10 into his system. I see it as more of a case of Carvalho being 19 years of age, developing his game to be able to play in a Liverpool midfield. But it'll be interesting to see kind of where he's utilised across the season. I think people are going to be surprised by how much he plays, to be honest. I don't think he's going to be someone who we're only going to see in Carabao Cup games, or we're going to see him playing for the 23s next season. He's going to be someone who's going to play in the Premier League. Okay, he's not going to play 25, 30 games, I'd imagine, but we will see him, a few times, I'd imagine. And it's going to be interesting where that is exactly. So, he's an exciting one, really. He's a bit of an unknown quantity to an extent, a young player capable of playing in quite a few positions, making the step up from the Championship. But there's one thing that Liverpool have been able to hang the hat on in recent years. It's the success of the transfers that have come into the squad. So, yeah, that's going to be an exciting season for him. I thought, as Marcus mentioned, for Nunez's fourth, that kind of header when he nods it over his man, and then he's attacking that space behind the defence, isn't he? Or in front of the defence, carries it 20, 30 yards. and then just has the presence of mind just to delay the pass for the right time for Nunez to finish off. It was quite a mature bit of play from such a young player. So yeah, he's going to be a little bit of a could be a surprise package if you like this season. I'm looking forward to seeing how he develops over the next season, and obviously with Nunez, Ramsey's a little bit of a different kettle of fish. There's no expectation on him to be a superstar anytime soon. But Nunez, I'd imagine all the pressure is on him after the 3 signings this summer. But if that's kind of how he reacts to pressure like he did last night, then I'm sure he'll be well set up to handle that.
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying there on the formation. I'm not sure the dog does. He just sat up, looked at you, and while she was discussing that, but I get what you're saying. I certainly do. Doyley, in terms of yourself, then, of course, you were saying Carvalho could well be a surprise package. Who would you have as contenders this season for Liverpool to kind of be in that kind of breakout star category, as it were?
Don't know. You got me there. I think you probably have to say Carvalho. The interesting thing, well, with Carvalho, it'll be the same as Nunez. Liverpool will just say to them for the first few months, just go and do whatever you normally did it, wherever you used to play, Fulham or Benfica. Don't do anything particularly different. You know why we bought you. And that's what will happen. There'll be no pressure on Carvalho, as Ghosty said. I think what's interesting, there wasn't really any kind of, the positions that he played, there wasn't really any defensive responsibilities for him, which is obviously the tough bit when you're playing in a Klopp team, as we've seen from several players in the past. And it does tend to be that the attacking players are far more likely to hit the ground running than it is with the midfield or defensive players. But, you look at how long it took Robertson, how long it took Fabinho. There are these, and then compare that to Diaz and Salah and Mane when they came straight in and then off they go. So I do think there is that with with a Klopp team. In terms of surprise players, I tell you, it's going to be a big season for Curtis Jones. You mentioned him before. I think this is one where, again, he's somebody who'll benefit from the 5 substitutions rule. I think it's interesting in the games, in the friendlies so far. He's not done anything wrong, but he's not quite captured the imagination as much as some of the other players. And is that a sign of maturity? Because he seems to have found this position now. When he's played, he's been on the left of the midfield 3. And he had a very good game, one I wasn't at actually, towards the end of last season at Southampton, which is probably one of his best games he's ever played for Liverpool. And that was a kind of a sign of what he's capable of doing. He was a bit more disciplined, a bit more, as I say, mature. But I do think with Curtis Jones, he needs to. There's a reason why Klopp said a couple of years ago we're going to have some fun with him, because he's that kind of player. I mean, there was a little bit. You saw a little bit of that last night, wasn't there? Where he got the ball at the touchline, and I think the crowd were quite enjoying the fact he was holding off about 3 players and putting it through the legs, and going around them. And then, it ultimately didn't really count for much, but it was just a nice piece of play, and it was something that when you play with confidence can do that. He's always had that in him, but it's a matter of now getting the minutes, and it's going to be tough because, as we've said, you look for Fabinho, Henderson. Milner's going to get some games, isn't he? Who else plays in midfield? I forgot now. I was off for 3 weeks. I can't remember what's going on. Keita, Thiago. Yeah, look, Keita, Thiago. Carvalho, Elliott. There's quite a lot. For a team that apparently is very short in midfield, they haven't got a lot of midfielders, haven't they? It's interesting that when there was no games, people were worrying about, Liverpool need to sign a midfielder. There's Oxlade-Chamberlain. There's another one. And he's someone, again, just a bad timing for an injury, because I thought he'd done quite well in the two games that he played. And Klopp made a point of mentioning it even before he had the injury. After the first game against United, he said he liked bits of what he saw from him. So, that is a lot of players, and Jones is going to have to get in amongst them, and he will get minutes, but it's a matter of making the most of them, especially when you have someone like Carvalho coming in, who, I know Ghosty said that Liverpool don't tend to play with a number 10. I think that might change this season. They may start. They did it a bit when Shaqiri was there, didn't they? They played that 4-2-3-1, and Salah played ahead of Firmino, and that could be a place where Firmino plays. I know this has been speculated on quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, but suddenly Liverpool have a lot of options. But Carvalho's never played a single game for Liverpool. Nunez has never played a single game for Liverpool, a competitive game anyway. So there is that sense of the unknown, and I do think it's going to take time for all of these things to work themselves out. And as I say, for someone like Curtis Jones, it could be an opportunity to, stamp his authority, because he's going to get chances.
It'd be interesting to see how it goes. Also, Stefan Bajcetic, who we were talking about before, he maybe counts in that midfield argument as well. We'll have to wait and see.
I don't think so. Let's be honest. Not yet.
I was
You're just playing devil's advocate there, guy.
Yeah,
Come on.
and I was only.
I know I've not been in the pot. Is this what he's been like when I've been away?
Just throwing.
Is this what he's been like?
I was just throwing more names in there.
The problem is, if Theo had been on this, he would have probably two-footed half of the players we've just mentioned now. And ruined the careers of all of them.
It's worth mentioning to our listeners, and thanks for rating and reviewing the podcast. You can do it wherever you listen to the podcast. But someone wrote a whole review about Theo Squires and how well he'd done at getting Aurelien Tchouameni's name right after a summer of butchering it, and then he signed for Real Madrid. But yeah, thanks for those who do get in touch. Before we go, though, we are going to touch on the transfer window. And Marcus, we just listed off a whole host of midfield names there, yet everybody clamouring for a midfield arrival this summer. Doesn't really seem to make too much sense. And Sporting Lisbon's Matheus Nunez, I mean, it just go to confuse us further if Liverpool start signing players from the same league with the same surnames, but he's the latest one who's been linked. Doesn't really feel as though there's a desperate need, though, for Liverpool right now.
Yeah, I think, and as we've learned with Liverpool, if the transfer isn't usually done at this point, obviously things can change. But if Klopp wanted the midfielder, obviously there was interest in Tchouameni. But if he's willing to wait for the right target, be that Bellingham or someone else. So if he was out to get a midfielder desperately, then there would have been an alternative signed, and there hasn't been. So I think that speaks volumes. But I think Nunez is one that is coming from a league where it's proven to be a happy hunting ground for a lot of Premier League teams and Liverpool especially. He sort of does fit the profile of a midfielder Liverpool would want to go and sign. He's very good at taking people on. So if you're looking for that sort of creative midfielder, who's going to go and offer something a bit different to Liverpool's current crop of midfielders, he is probably one. But like you say, there's no reason why Naby Keita can't continue the form he showed in glimpses last season if he can stay fit and be that midfielder that he was signed to be. Really, he's playing for a new contract too, so you've got to think that this is probably his biggest season yet at Liverpool. And if Oxlade-Chamberlain can get fit again, we know he's capable of doing those sorts of things as well. And like Doyle said, Curtis Jones really needs to break out too and prove that he can, he's not just another name and he can bring something to the Liverpool side. So I think he does tick all the boxes, but again, not really going to make much sense if Liverpool are indeed willing to wait until next year to add that star quality in midfielder. Then that's what's going to happen, really.
It does feel like that as well, Gorsty, doesn't it? Actually, that the midfield is such an integral setup of what Jurgen Klopp wants from his team that wouldn't make sense going late for a midfielder, spending huge money as well. And as Marcus said there as well, kind of, it's one of those that you would have thought would be done by now. I initially thought he was kind of thinking of if there's a player where rumours are speculating around a Liverpool perhaps inquiry or move. These days, if the rumour goes on for longer than a week, it's probably not all too genuine because Liverpool move at the speed of light on a number of these deals that they really want to conclude.
They do, yeah. Luis Diaz is probably the perfect example of that. I think it was Liverpool made their move on the Tuesday of that week, and by Sunday they were announcing him as a player after Tottenham, had made their initial moves. And Darwin Nunez was wrapped up before Sadio Mane had even left. So certainly it's become a little bit of a hallmark of their transfer moves that they just go out and get the number one target who they want done and dusted. That's why it becomes a little bit difficult to second guess them at times because they move so swiftly and decisively. I think Mohamed Salah's contract is another example of that. A small delegation flew out to Mykonos to get it done and dusted, and quite a few people at the club knew nothing about it. So yeah, it's I'm sure we're going to see Liverpool linked to more and more players as the transfer window goes on. It is as ever the case, but I think if the squad is as it is now, I think Klopp feels that he's got enough. He said that to myself and a few colleagues from the Nationals just a few weeks ago. I'm sure he said something similar to Doyle when he was out in Thailand. It's a consistent stance. If no one's come to him and said that they want to leave, then Liverpool are preparing for the season as it is. And to be fair, with Liverpool, say for example, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain with the subjective interest from a middle of the range Premier League club.
West Ham, let's pick them. They're the ones who have been linked with him.
Yeah,
they having not got Jesse Lingard.
They always seem to be kind of thrown in with Oxlade-Chamberlain, don't they? I mean, what are Liverpool going to get for him? He's in last year of his contract. Are they really going to be able to replace him at this stage with the funds that they get for him, which is probably not going to be anywhere near his true value? I think he's probably more valuable to Liverpool staying for the season, seeing out his contract and playing a part in the push for honours. So, as it is, we've heard for weeks now that Liverpool are pretty much done and dusted on the incoming front, and that nothing has really made me change my mind that Liverpool are actually looking at the moment, or seriously looking, because they're always looking. But you know what I mean when you say kind of moving the troops into action.
Yeah, the race for the transfer shield is really hotting up at the moment, Doyle, as well. Liverpool don't seem to be in contention, but I'd argue they've had an exemplary window. They got all of the players they wanted in prior to the start of pre-season, have moved on two for decent fees as well, in the likes of Mane and Nico Williams as well. We're 2 weeks today from the start of the new Premier League season, yet you look around the rest of Liverpool's so-called rivals this year, and I mean, all of them still have plenty of work still to do, yet Liverpool are preparing with what they've got. And it seems to be the situation you want to be in. You mentioned before, there's 5 Premier League games in August this month. The window doesn't shut until the end of that month. That's 5 games you can easily slip behind in. And we know the level that the Premier League's been at over the last few seasons. You can't let games just pass you by.
I think Tottenham and City will be quite happy with what they've done so far. So I don't think they'll be too worried. And I think they're the 2 main rivals for Liverpool for the title this season. So I think that's no coincidence, really. United are going to be a lot better, aren't they? And they've signed 1 or 2 players, and I think they'll sign another couple. Although probably not Frankie de Jong, given the fact he seems to absolutely hate Manchester, which, is a bit harsh, if we're being perfectly honest. Needs to get to St. Helens. Bloody hell. And who else is there? Arsenal. Oh, Arsenal will do better. I mean, going back to the Oxlade-Chamberlain West Ham thing, is that West Ham need to sell somebody, don't they? They've spent an awful lot of money in the last couple of years, and from what I've heard, is that they'd need to move somebody on to try and get anybody else in. And I think,
well, they're throwing money at Skamaka, aren't they?
Well, I mean, unless this is the thing, is that they seem to be throwing a lot of money everywhere. They don't seem to be selling anybody. When was the last time West Ham sold anyone? So it's great for squad unity, but not so good when you need to get some money in. And I think, as you said, Guy, Liverpool have done quite well on that again this season. And this summer, sorry. And I think Diaz was meant to come in January. Meant to come this summer, wasn't he? Really? And they only moved because they wouldn't have signed him if Tottenham hadn't gone for him. Let's be honest. I don't think they'd have signed him in the summer, which means they'd have signed Diaz, Nunez, Ramsey, Carvalho, which is a left winger, a forward, a midfield, and a right back, which is, as you say, that's what they wanted. And the only way they'll probably sign anyone else is if somebody has to leave. And as Gorsty said, Klopp said no one's asked. So there may be. I mean, even the centre-back situation we said before, Nat Phillips is 5th choice. Reece Williams has gone out on loan. If they need somebody, that Vandenberg's there. So I can't see anyone else coming in unless, I know Marcus said normally they get everything done quite handy. I think Oxlade-Chamberlain was bought on deadline day, wasn't he, in 2017, because they saw an opportunity there. That's the only reason or way I think Liverpool might sign somebody. And otherwise, yeah. For those people, right, the transfer rumours, it's bad news, isn't it? Because that's all they're going to be, rumours, at least for the next 5 weeks.
Well, while we've been on this pod, James Pearce, obviously our friend and former colleague, has tweeted there.
Former colleague,
yeah. I suppose I was stretching the truth of it there with the friend. But, told that talk of Liverpool bidding for Sporting's Matheus Nunes is nonsense. Club stance unchanged regarding summer business. No plans to strengthen midfield further in this window, and that kind of tallies up with what we've been reporting and what we've heard for the last 6 weeks or so. Certainly since Calvin Ramsey was brought in. So it's as you were, I suppose, in terms of Liverpool's business this summer.
A final word then, Marcus. If Liverpool were to strengthen though this summer, we've mentioned the amount of midfield players. To me, you'd look at the forward line and say, we said before, it's 5 goes into 3. Yes, Elliott can probably supplement that. Carvalho can as well. But with Origi, Minamino and Mane all going, and Darwin Nunez and Luis Diaz, if you're going to say that was a deal that was going to happen this summer, still perhaps one light there if they're going to challenge on all 4 fronts. But equally, probably more than enough there anyway to go for a good battle across multiple fronts, as it were.
Yeah, the only possible position you could probably say is a right-sided forward to sort of back up Salah, even though Jota's played there albeit not to the best of his ability. I don't think he's sort of just been shoehorned in there. I think Firmino played on the right, the same as, and obviously Elliott can play there, but I think we've all said midfield is probably his best position. Again, it just depends on outgoings. If a couple leave in midfield and maybe one or two go out on loan, then you maybe look at a midfielder. But again, it has to fit the profile. He has to be. I think the situation would have to change if someone maybe previously wasn't available becomes available. Then Liverpool, like the same sort of thing with Diaz, they were forced to make a move there. But yeah, it's if it's the case of waiting for someone like Jude Bellingham next year, then I think a lot of fans would rather do that.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that does play out. That wraps us up then for this edition of the Blood Red podcast. We will be back next week, of course, but great to have you back involved, Marcus. No appearance for the cat. And Doyle, good to see you back in shiny, sunny St. Helens. Or
it's actually raining. Yeah.
Exactly what you'd expect. And Gorsty, thanks as ever as well, pal. But from myself, Guy Clarke, the rest of the team, that's it from us here on the Blood Red podcast. Until next time, it's bye for now.